I didn't realize until somebody asked me about my scars and how I got them to fade as much as I did, that I realized that they even faded so much. If you recall, this is how my scars looked. They were raised in some areas about a quarter of an inch from the skin. They were dark purple. They were constantly, nonstop, either itching or in a lot of pain. And that was the route that led me to getting them treated. I'm not being paid to discuss any sort of brand. I will tell you what I used and the method by which I used it and the results that I received. What I will say is that it stings. It feels a little bit like a little electric shock every time you use it. Hey pal, it's Lucas. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome for the first time if you're new. Today we're going to do a little bit of a different video than what I would normally put on my channel, but it's something that I feel like is worth discussing, and I wanted to share it with you. Now, obviously, off the bat, you might be thinking, wow, Lucas, your lighting setup is garbage, and believe me, sis, I know. There's nothing I can do about it. You may also be thinking, what the heck is the layout in this room? What is going on? But just know that my room is currently a work in progress. I am reorganizing yet again, as I do often, to keep things exciting for my ADHD brain. But all of that aside, I just want to welcome you to today's video, where we're actually going to be talking about keloid scarring. And this is a topic that actually I think would be of interest to two different populations within my audience base. So population A being transgender individuals who have received surgery or are wanting to receive surgery in the chest region, and also population B being hypermobile individuals who are at a higher likelihood of developing keloid scarring and hypertrophic scars. And I just want to talk about my experience with keloid scarring and what I found to be an effective treatment pathway, albeit a lengthy treatment pathway, to getting my keloid scars from looking like this to looking like this. So, first thing I want to address is the timeline. These results did not happen overnight. They didn't even happen over the course of 1 year. For reference, the surgery that I had that caused these scars, I had at the end of 2021. We are now at the end of 2025. So think about the length of time for the healing process and those keloids to scar. And then think of the length of time for the treatment process, which is much longer than the healing process. So I had that surgery in October, November of 2021, and at first my scars looked pretty normal. They didn't seem to be having any issues with healing. Everything was looking well. But within 6 months of my surgery, it was evident that I had begun to keloid. And with the way that the healing process goes, there are a few different things that you can do. One, which my surgeon did suggest, was to get into a hyperbaric chamber, which I couldn't afford to do, to get in some sort of cryotherapy, which I also could not afford to do, to jump back under the knife in his office, which, again, I could not afford to do, or to wait about a year and then begin steroid injections and potentially do some lasering and kind of cross my fingers and hope for the best. And with the circumstances that I was in the moment, having just spent my entire savings on the top surgery itself, that's the route that I ended up going with, was that final route. And so 1 year after my surgery, if you recall, this is how my scars looked. They were raised in some areas about a quarter of an inch from the skin. They were dark purple. They were very stiff and puffy. They were lumpy. And worst of all, like, those things can be tolerated, but the problem was, the big challenge I was dealing with was they were constantly, nonstop either itching or in a lot of pain. And that was the route that led me to getting them treated. I went to a dermatologist. They looked at my chest and they said, well, the first thing we're going to want to do is treat the thick puffy tissue and get that flattened out, get that smoothed out as best we can, and that will alleviate the itching and the pain, which was caused primarily by just a buildup of tension in those tissues due to them being just sort of overfilled by collagen. So the treatment for that is very simple. It just involves some very localized and specific steroid injections directly into those tissues. And we did a couple of sessions of that over the span of 6 months, and I saw significant improvement. So here is from October of 2022 into March of 2023. Already you can see the edges of the scar have started to dissipate. The scars themselves have begun to smooth out. They're not nearly as raised, and they just don't seem as puffy and firm. From personal experience, I was in a lot less pain. I was in a lot less discomfort. It was a lot easier to exist and go through my day-to-day routine. I was still a little bit itchy. I was still experiencing a little bit of pain, but part of the other process and sort of the homework that I had to cope with those things was to take those as a cue to initiate massaging with shea butter or coconut oil or really any sort of smooth, natural, lotioning substance that would absorb into my skin. And so that's what I did. Also, in 2023, I invested in an at-home IPL treatment method because I could have received in-office IPL, but it would have cost me a lot of money. So I'm not going to advertise or promote any specific brand of at-home IPL because I think each one has its own pros and cons. Each one has its own benefits. I'm not being paid to discuss any sort of brand. I will tell you what I used and the method by which I used it and the results that I think that I received as a product of using the IPL in conjunction with the steroid injections and twice daily massaging. But ultimately, whatever you choose to do is up to you, and this is not an endorsement of any specific product. So the one that I ended up getting is actually an IPL treatment which is meant to be used for laser hair removal. The brand is called Nude, and the model that I got is the Flasher V 2.0. V is in Victor. The way that this guy works is you plug it into the wall, and then you place this screen here up to your skin, like so, and then you initiate the flash. Now you can set it up to automatically initiate the flash, or you can set it up to initiate a flash at your own pacing as you press the button. You can increase and decrease the power of that flash. What I will say is that it stings. It feels a little bit like a little electric shock every time you use it. I used it on level 6 or 7 majority of the time, and I did that every other day for 8 weeks and then took a break, and then again intermittently as I remembered that I had that device at home. So that started in March of 2023, and by July, August of 2023, I saw even more improvement, such that I wasn't even taking photos. I didn't even think about it anymore. The tissues had significantly softened, the color had begun to fade quite a bit, and again, I was still regularly doing massaging. Over this last year, I've sort of retired this IPL treatment because I feel like I've gotten all that I can out of it. And I've migrated to just using regular old shea butter and a good massage tool. Again, I'm not advertising for any company here. I'm not sponsored by anybody, and I'm not endorsing any company. This is just my latest tool that I'm using by Dr. DHT. It's called Scar Salve Fade and Soften, and so I use this. I was using it once a day Now it's more like once a week just because of the routine that I've got. It doesn't really include this very much. And this little massage tool here, which really allows you to work into those scars, and it's just a matter of moving along the scar in tiny little circles, one direction and the other direction, and just really making sure you're putting an ample amount of pressure into that region to stimulate blood flow and help migrate the rest of that collagen and stubborn tissue out so that your body can just process it. And that is it. And so over the course of from 2022 through this year, I've been seeing slow progress, and it has been slow. I didn't realize until somebody asked me about my scars and how I got them to fade as much as I did, that I realized that they even faded so much, you know what I mean? And so I actually made this collage, put this all together so you guys can see kind of the timeline of what that looks like on either side. I figured this would be really handy information to share with anybody who deals with keloid or hypertrophic scarring. Now, hypertrophic scarring, I know, is a different beast to keloid scarring, so I don't really want to speak too much on that, but these are things that might help you. But the very first thing that you want to do when you notice that you've got that keloiding, aside from let your surgeon know, is reach out to a dermatologist. Reach out to a dermatologist who is familiar with keloiding and who is comfortable working on that, and set up a plan on how you want to approach it, because keloiding sucks. It itches and it hurts. Even if it's not a top surgery sort of situation, maybe you had a knee surgery or surgery on your carpal tunnel, or you had a C-section, and all of those things can still form a keloid scar. This is the route that I took. It took a long time to see the results that I have, and often when I was working on the scars, I didn't feel like I was doing anything to help them. I hoped that I was, but I had kind of accepted the fact that my scarring was always going to look like it did toward the end of the surgery healing phase in 2022. And it doesn't. Thank you for watching, and if you like what you saw today and you want to see more, let me know in the comments. Hit that button down below, subscribe, join the flight, become a pigeon pal. We do all kinds of stuff on this channel. Most of it is body doubling. Some of it is vlogging. I do body doubling for studying, remote work, chores, errands, working out, fitness routines, meal prep, pretty much anything that you would have to do as a part of your day-to-day life that might be difficult for you to motivate to do. This channel is a way for us to be there for each other, to encourage each other to accomplish the goals that we have. And sometimes that looks like something as simple as cleaning out the dishwasher. Even if you don't have anything particular to say about this video, if you could just drop a little pigeon in the comments, that would be amazing. I do try to respond to everybody. If you got questions, ask them, because I'm sure somebody else has the same question as you. And I look forward to sharing more with you guys soon. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.